They won't let me eat, Mommy. 5 words. That's all it took. 5 words from a 5-year-old girl sitting in a pink wheelchair, staring at a cold waffle she wasn't allowed to touch. Her mother's card had been declined. The owner of the diner didn't whisper. He announced it. Loud, cruel, in front of 30 adults who heard everything and did nothing. But someone else heard it too. A man in a leather jacket. A biker with scars older than that little girl's whole life. And what he did next, nobody in that town will ever forget. If this story moves you, subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Rachel's hands were shaking when she slid the card across the counter for the second time. She already knew. She knew before the machine beeped. She knew before the little red light blinked. She knew the way a mother knows when something is about to go wrong. In her chest, in her gut, in that place between her ribs where hope and fear fight for the same space. The card declined. Again. Victor didn't even look at the machine. He looked at her. And there was something in his eyes that wasn't confusion. It wasn't sympathy. It was satisfaction. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear, "if your card doesn't work, you need to leave. This isn't a charity." Rachel felt every head in the room turn. She felt the weight of 30 pairs of eyes, some curious, some embarrassed, most just grateful it wasn't happening to them. "Please," she whispered, "it's just one waffle. I'll come back tomorrow with cash, I promise. My daughter hasn't eaten since." "Tomorrow doesn't pay today's bill," Victor said. He straightened his collar. He smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile that says, "I have power, and you don't, and we both know it." Rachel looked back at the booth. Emma was sitting in her wheelchair, her little hands folded in her lap, staring at the waffle in front of her. Golden. Butter melting into the squares. Getting cold. Emma hadn't touched it. She knew. Kids always know. They hear the tone before they understand the words. They feel the shift in the room before anyone explains it. And Emma, 5 years old, blonde curls, green eyes that had seen the inside of more hospitals than playgrounds, she already understood what was happening. Her mother couldn't pay. The waffle wasn't hers. "Ma'am," Victor said again, stepping around the counter, "I need the table." Rachel's throat closed. She reached for her purse, fumbling, desperate, pulling out a crumpled 5 that she suddenly remembered she'd used for gas the night before. Empty. The purse was empty. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracked right down the middle. "I'm so sorry. I thought I had—" "You thought wrong." And that's when it happened. Emma's voice, so small, so quiet, like a match struck in a cathedral. "They won't let me eat, Mommy." The diner died. Not slowly, not gradually. It died the way a heart stops, all at once. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Coffee cups hung in the air. A farmer in the third booth stopped chewing mid-bite. A retired school teacher near the window pressed her napkin against her lips and held it there. 30 adults heard a 5-year-old girl in a wheelchair say the most devastating sentence any of them had ever heard in their lives. And not one of them moved. Not one spoke. Not one stood up. Not one reached for their wallet. They looked down at their plates. They looked out the window. They looked anywhere except at that little girl. Rachel pressed her hand over her mouth so hard, her fingers turned white. A single tear broke loose and rolled down her cheek, cutting a line through the exhaustion on her face. "Baby, it's okay," she whispered. "We'll eat at home. But you said I could have a waffle." Emma's voice wasn't angry. It wasn't demanding. It was confused. The kind of confusion that comes from a child who was promised one good thing after 3 weeks of needles and hospital beds and machines that beeped all night long. Victor crossed his arms. "Ma'am, the table. Now." Rachel stood up. Her chair scraped the floor. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. She grabbed her purse, moved behind Emma's wheelchair, and started to push. Emma looked down at the waffle as it slid away from her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just watched it go, the way a child watches a balloon float into a sky she can't reach. That was the moment the front door swung open. The bell above the door rang once. Hard. 6 men walked in. Leather, boots, diesel and road dust, and the kind of silence that follows thunder. The patches on their backs were faded from sun and rain, but the words were clear enough. Hell's Angels. The diner, which had already gone quiet, now went absolutely still. The kind of still that comes when something dangerous enters a room, and nobody knows yet whether it's dangerous for them. The man in front was the biggest, not just tall, wide, built like he'd been assembled from bridge cables and bad decisions. Blonde hair streaked with gray, pulled back tight. A beard that looked like it had weathered 40 winters. Blue eyes so deep and still, they looked like frozen lakes. His name was Axel, 54 years old, and he hadn't set foot in a place like this in months. He preferred gas station coffee and whatever the road offered. But Tank had said his stomach was screaming, and Axel had pulled off the highway because the sign said, home cooking, and sometimes that's all a man needs to hear. He didn't expect what he walked into. Axel stopped 3 steps inside the door. His eyes moved across the room the way a man's eyes move when he's spent a lifetime reading danger. Fast, precise, missing nothing. He saw the counter. He saw Victor with his arms crossed and his chin up. He saw Rachel, frozen mid-step behind a pink wheelchair, her face wet, her hands gripping the handles like they were the only things keeping her from falling apart. And he saw Emma, small, so impossibly small, blonde curls, green eyes looking up at a room full of adults who had just watched her get pushed away from the only thing she'd asked for. Something moved in Axel's chest, something old, something buried. He didn't speak to his crew. He didn't look at Victor. He walked, slow, heavy, each boot hitting the floor like a heartbeat, straight to the booth. Rachel saw him coming and stepped back, pulling Emma's wheelchair closer. Please, sir, we were just leaving. We don't want any trouble. Axel didn't look at Rachel. He looked at Emma. He knelt down, one knee on the floor. His leather jacket creaked. His face, which had been carved from stone a moment ago, softened into something that surprised even the men who'd ridden beside him for 20 years. Hey, he said. His voice was low, gentle, like gravel wrapped in cotton. What did you just say, sweetheart? Emma stared at him. This giant, this mountain of a man with hands big enough to crush a brick, kneeling on a diner floor to talk to her. She looked at her mom. Rachel shook her head slightly. Don't, baby, just let it go. But Axel waited, patient, still, like he had all the time in the world. I heard you say something, he said. When I was coming through that door, you said it real quiet, but I heard it. Can you tell me again? Emma's chin trembled. Her little fingers curled around the edge of her fleece blanket, the one with the stars on it, the one she'd had since her first surgery. They won't let me eat, she said. Axel didn't blink. His jaw tightened. His hands resting on his knee went completely still. Behind his eyes, something moved. Something enormous. Something that had nothing to do with this diner and everything to do with a trailer park outside Louisville, and a boy who once went 2 days without a meal because a man behind a counter called him a freeloader. He stayed down, eye level with her. You hungry? Emma nodded. What do you want to eat? A waffle. Her voice was barely there. With strawberries. Hearts, Rachel said from behind, almost involuntarily. She likes them cut like hearts. Axel looked at Rachel for the first time. He saw the dark circles. He saw the ponytail coming undone. He saw the kind of tire that doesn't come from one bad night. It comes from months, maybe years, of carrying everything alone. He nodded once. Then he stood. When he turned around, the whole room shifted. The softness was gone. His face was locked. His eyes were fixed on one man, Victor. Who told her that? Axel said. Victor took a step back. His confidence, which had been so large a minute ago, suddenly looked small. Told her what? That she couldn't eat. Listen, pal, her card was declined. I've got a business to run. Bills don't pay themselves. I can't just... Who told a 5-year-old girl in a wheelchair that she couldn't have a waffle? The question hung in the air like smoke. Victor opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It's policy. It's not personal. You can't just... Axel reached inside his leather vest. The room flinched. Every single person, the farmer, the school teacher, the mechanic with grease still under his nails. They all saw a biker reach inside his jacket, and every one of them held their breath. Axel pulled out a wallet. Brown leather, old, cracked, worn soft by years of being carried close to the chest. He opened it, pulled out $200 bills, and laid them flat on the counter. Her meal's paid, he said. Bring her anything she wants. And if you've got strawberries in that kitchen, cut them like hearts. Behind the counter, a young waitress named Jenna, blonde, kind-eyed, the only person in this diner who had tried to help, exhaled like she'd been holding her breath underwater for the past 10 minutes. She spun toward the kitchen before Victor could say a word. Victor stared at the money, then at Axel, then at the money again. I don't take orders from bikers, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. It came out thin, hollow. Axel leaned forward, not threateningly, worse, calmly. Then think of it as advice. Victor went pale. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He picked up the bills, folded them, and put them in the register without another word. 3 minutes later, Jenna came through the kitchen door carrying a plate like it was made of gold. A fresh waffle, golden, steaming, butter pooling in the squares. Strawberries cut into perfect hearts arranged around the edge. A tower of whipped cream. A glass of cold milk with a blue straw. She set it in front of Emma. Emma stared at it. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened. She looked at the plate, then at Axel, then at her mom, then back at the plate. Is that for me? Axel was standing by the counter, arms crossed, watching. And something happened to his face that Tank would later say he'd never seen in 20 years of riding together. The hardness cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like concrete splitting open to let something green push through. All yours, sweetheart, Axel said. Take your time. Rachel broke. She'd been holding it. She'd been holding it since the card declined, since Victor said, "This isn't a charity," since her daughter whispered those 5 words. She'd been holding it all the way through, the way mothers do, because falling apart is a luxury they can't afford. But now she broke. Tears poured through her fingers. Her shoulders shook. She turned away from Emma so her daughter wouldn't see, but Emma wasn't looking at her mother. Emma was looking at the waffle. You didn't have to do that, Rachel said, her voice shattered. Yeah, Axel said, I did. Emma picked up her fork. She gripped it with both hands. She was still working on her fine motor skills after the surgeries, after the months of therapy, after the damage that a muscle condition does to a body that hasn't even started its life yet. She cut into the waffle. She lifted the bite. Syrup dripped onto the table. She put it in her mouth. And she smiled. Not a polite smile, not a brave smile, a real smile. A full, unguarded, 5-year-old girl smile that started at her lips and went all the way up to her eyes. The kind of smile that only exists in children who still believe the world can be good. It's good, Mommy, she said, syrup on her chin. It's really good. Rachel laughed, through the tears, through the exhaustion, through the weight of everything she'd been carrying for 2 years alone. She laughed. Tank, 6'4", bald, arms the size of most men's legs, leaned over to Axel. All this over a waffle, boss? Axel didn't look at Tank. He watched Emma eat. It's never about the waffle. Tank nodded slowly. No, I guess it ain't. The diner started to breathe again. Conversations restarted. Quiet, careful, shame-filled. People who had sat in silence 3 minutes ago were now whispering to each other, glancing at the booth, their faces twisted with the specific guilt of people who know they should have acted and didn't. Rachel wiped her face. She took a long breath and turned to Axel. "Her name is Emma," she said. "She's 5. We've been at the hospital in Louisville for 3 weeks. She has a muscle condition. She's had 4 surgeries since she was 3. The doctors say she might walk again someday, but they can't promise." Axel listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty words. "Her father left," Rachel said. The sentence came out flat. The way a sentence sounds when it's been said so many times, it's lost all its edges. Right after the diagnosis, 2 years ago, packed a bag and drove away. Hasn't called, hasn't sent $1, hasn't asked about her once. "Rachel," Jenna said softly from behind the counter. "I work at the laundromat on 5th, 6 days a week," Rachel continued. She wasn't talking to Axel anymore. She was talking to the room, to all of them, to every person who had looked away. "And I pick up shifts at the gas station on weekends. I make enough to keep the lights on and keep her in therapy. That's it. That's all there is." She looked at Emma. The little girl was now dipping a strawberry heart into whipped cream with intense concentration. "She asked me for one thing before the drive home. One thing. After 3 weeks of hospitals and needles and waking up in pain and never once complaining. She said, 'Mommy, can I have a waffle?' That's all she wanted." Rachel's voice broke again. "And I couldn't even give her that." "You gave her that," Axel said. "You brought her here. You tried. That counts." "It doesn't feel like it counts." "It counts to her." Rachel looked at her daughter. Emma was humming now. Humming and eating and swinging her feet, the feet that didn't work the way other children's feet worked, back and forth under the blanket with the stars. Jenna appeared beside Axel. She spoke quietly, meant only for him. "I tried to cover the bill myself, from my tips. Victor said no, said it would set a precedent." Those were his exact words. Axel's jaw hardened. A precedent. "He fired our cook last month for giving a kid extra fries. A kid. He yelled at me for a week because I gave a homeless man free coffee on Christmas Eve." "What's the cook's name?" "Charlie. Charlie Boudreau. Best cook this diner ever had. His grandmother taught him everything. When he was here, people drove an hour just for his waffles." Axel filed the name away. "And Victor? He always like this?" "No. He's worse now. But he was never what his daddy was." Jenna looked at the old black and white photos hanging on the wall behind the register. A man in an apron standing in front of the diner the day it opened. Wide smile. Flour on his hands. "That's old Henry, Victor's father. He built this place with his own hands. He ran it for 37 years, and in 37 years, not one person walked out hungry. Not one." "What happened to him?" "Died. 3 years ago. Heart attack behind that very counter. Victor took over and..." She stopped, shook her head. "You saw what he turned it into." "Yeah," Axel said. "I saw." The bikers finished their coffee. Tank paid for the whole crew, dropped cash on the counter without looking at Victor. Axel stood to leave. "Wait!" The voice came from behind them. Small, clear, ringing. Axel stopped. Every biker stopped. They turned. Emma was leaning forward in her wheelchair, one hand on the table, looking straight at Axel with those green eyes. "You're leaving?" "Got a long road ahead, sweetheart." "But I didn't say thank you yet." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Mom said always say thank you when someone's nice to you." She paused, tilted her head, studied him the way only children can, without judgment, without pretense, with nothing but pure honesty. "You look scary," she said. Tank snorted. 2 riders behind him covered their mouths. "But you're really nice," Emma finished. Axel stood completely still. His chest rose once, slowly. His eyes, Those cold, hard, road-worn blue eyes went soft, went wet. He blinked it back. Almost. He crouched down beside her wheelchair one more time. That's the best thing anybody's ever said to me. Really? Really. You should smile more, Emma said. You're prettier when you smile. The bikers lost it. Low laughter. Real laughter. The kind that comes from a place that doesn't get used often enough. Tank turned away and pressed his fist against his mouth. Even Rachel, exhausted, broken Rachel, laughed through her tears. Axel smiled, and it changed his whole face. The lines rearranged. The hardness melted. For 1 second, he didn't look like a man who'd survived 54 years of hard road. He looked like someone who remembered what it felt like to be seen. I'll work on that, he said. He stood, headed for the door. His crew fell in behind him, but at the threshold, Axel stopped. He turned, not to Emma, not to Rachel, to Victor. Victor was behind the counter, arranging glasses, pretending to be busy, pretending the last 20 minutes hadn't happened. Hey, Axel said. Victor looked up. You ever been hungry? Victor frowned. What? Hungry. Not skipped lunch hungry. Not I'll eat later hungry. Real hungry. The kind that wakes you up at 3 in the morning because your stomach is eating itself. The kind where a kid learns not to ask for food because she already knows at 5 years old, that the answer is no. The diner was silent again, but different this time. Not the silence of shame, the silence of something being spoken that needed to be said. Victor didn't answer. Didn't think so, Axel said. He pushed the door open. The bell rang. He stepped out into the afternoon light with his 5 brothers behind him, and the door swung shut. Inside the diner, the only sound was a little girl eating a waffle and humming a song she'd made up on the spot. Jenna stood behind the counter, staring at the door, tears sliding quietly down her face. The old farmer in the third booth set his fork down. He looked at his half-eaten plate. He pushed it away. He reached for his wallet, pulled out a $20 bill, and walked over to Rachel's booth. This is for next time, he said. His voice was rough, ashamed. I should have said something. I'm sorry. Rachel looked up at him. She didn't take the money. She took his hand and held it, just for a moment. Thank you, she said. He nodded, walked back to his booth, sat down, and for a long time he just stared out the window at the empty parking lot where 6 motorcycles had been. Victor stood behind the counter with his hand on the register. The $200 bills sat inside. He stared at them. Then he closed the drawer. He walked to the back office. He sat in his father's old chair, the one with the cracked leather, the one that still smelled like pipe tobacco and dish soap. He put his head in his hands. On the desk in front of him, in a wooden frame that hadn't been dusted in years, was a photograph of his father, old Henry Dalton, standing in front of the golden plate the day it opened, flour on his apron, the widest smile Hollow Creek had ever seen. Victor looked at the photograph, and for the first time in 3 years, he couldn't look away. Outside, 6 Harleys roared to life. The sound shook the windows, rattled the coffee cups, and rolled down Main Street like thunder. And somewhere on that road, heading west into the fading afternoon sun, Axel rode with one hand on the throttle and the other pressed flat against his chest, against the place where a wallet sat in his inside pocket. The same wallet his mother had given him when he was 12 years old. The same wallet he'd been carrying the day a man behind a counter called him a freeloader and sent him away hungry. The same wallet that held, folded behind his driver's license, a single piece of paper, yellow with age, written in a child's handwriting, 4 words, I won't forget this. He hadn't. And now, riding through the hills of Kentucky with the wind tearing at his face and his brothers at his back, Axel knew something he hadn't known that morning. He was going back, not for the coffee, not for the waffles, for the girl who reminded him of everything he'd sworn to become and everything the world had tried to beat out of him. He gripped the throttle. The engines screamed, and the road ahead had never looked so clear. The engines cooled at a gas station 6 miles east of Hollow Creek. The kind of place that should have closed 20 years ago, but kept breathing because one man refused to let it die. Hank was 73 years old. He came out with a pot of coffee before anyone asked, poured 6 cups on the tailgate of a rusted pickup, and didn't say a word until Axel was ready to talk. Axel wasn't ready for a while. He stood apart from his crew, his back against the pump, rolling an unlit cigarette between his fingers. Tank knew better than to approach. So did the others. When Axel went quiet like this, jaw locked, eyes fixed on something nobody else could see, you gave him room, you gave him time, and you waited. It was Tank who finally broke. Not to Axel, to Hank. "You know that diner in town? The Golden Plate?" Hank's face changed. "I know it." "You know the owner, Victor?" Hank set the coffee pot down slow. "I know him too. Known him since he was in diapers. Known his daddy longer." Axel turned his head. His daddy. Henry Dalton. Old Henry, everybody called him. Built that diner from nothing. Him and his wife. She picked the name. He laid every tile, hung every light, built those booths with lumber he hauled himself from a mill in Harlan County. Hank took a sip of his own coffee. Henry was the best man this town ever had, bar none. "What kind of man was he?" Axel asked. Hank smiled. It was the kind of smile that belongs to a memory too good for the world that replaced it. The kind who'd give you a free plate just for looking tired. The kind who kept a pot of soup on the stove every winter, not on the menu, just there, for whoever needed it. The kind who'd sit with you after your wife died and not say a word, just pour coffee and be there. 40 years he ran that place. 40 years. And I promise you, on my life, not one person, not one, ever walked out of that diner hungry. "And then he died," Axel said. "Heart attack. Right behind that counter. 3 years ago this October. They found him on the floor with his apron still on and a pot of coffee still brewing. Died the way he lived, in that kitchen, feeding people. And Victor took over." Hank's smile disappeared. "Victor took over, and inside 6 months, you wouldn't recognize the place. Raised prices, cut the portions in half, fired staff who'd been there 15, 20 years. Good people, loyal people, told them they were inefficient." That was his word, efficient. Hank spat the word like it tasted rotten. Henry's place was never about efficient. It was about full plates, full hearts, full bellies. Axel was quiet for a long time. The cigarette was still unlit between his fingers. "Today," he said, "a little girl was in there, 5 years old, wheelchair. Her mother's card declined on a $4 waffle, and Victor told them to leave. Announced it, in front of the whole diner." Hank closed his eyes. "Lord." The girl said 5 words, "They won't let me eat." And nobody in that room moved, not one person. Hank opened his eyes. They were wet. "That's not the town Henry built." "No," Axel said. "It's not. It's the town Victor made." Axel didn't respond to that. He pushed off the pump, walked to his bike, and pulled the wallet from his vest. He held it for a moment, didn't open it, just held it, the way a man holds something sacred. "We should ride," Tank said. "Still got 3 hours of daylight." "You all go ahead," Axel said. "Take the rooms at the motel in Greenville. I'll catch up." Tank studied him. "What are you doing?" "Thinking." "About what?" "About what happens next." Tank didn't push. He knew that tone. The others mounted up, kicked their engines alive, and pulled out onto the highway, one by one. Tank was last. He idled beside Axel for a moment. "That girl got to you," Tank said. Axel didn't deny it. "She got to all of us, Axel. But she got to you different." "Yeah, why?" Axel looked at him, straight on. No walls, no armor, just the raw, unprotected truth that lived behind all the leather and road dust and years. Because I was her, he said. Tank held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he nodded once, dropped his visor, and rode. Axel was alone. Hank had gone back inside. The gas station hummed. A moth circled the overhead light. Somewhere down the road, an owl called out once, and then went silent. Axel sat on the bench outside the station and opened his wallet. Behind the driver's license, behind a faded photo of a woman with dark hair who'd been dead for 15 years, he found the piece of paper. Yellow, brittle, folded so many times the creases had turned white. He unfolded it. 4 words in a child's handwriting. Pencil, smudged. Written the night he went to bed hungry because a man called him a freeloader. I won't forget this. He'd been 9 years old, a trailer park outside Louisville. His mother worked doubles at the textile mill and picked up weekend shifts cleaning offices downtown. She'd come home at midnight, hands cracked and red, and still make him a sandwich before she collapsed. But some weeks the money ran out before the days did. Some weeks the fridge was empty by Wednesday, and payday wasn't until Friday. Those nights, Axel would sit on the porch steps and count change. Nickels and dimes he'd found in couch cushions, parking lots, vending machine returns. He'd line them up on the step and do the math in his head. Enough for a candy bar? Maybe. Enough for a bag of chips? If he skipped the drink. He never told his mother. She carried enough. When he was 12, he walked into a diner, not much different from the Golden Plate, with $3.40 in his pocket. He'd counted it 6 times on the walk over. He sat at the counter. He ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a bowl of soup, $2.75. The man behind the counter looked at him, looked at his dirty jeans, his too small shoes, his jacket with the broken zipper, and he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "We don't serve freeloaders. Get out." Axel left. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He put the $3.40 back in his pocket and walked home in the dark. He didn't eat that night. He didn't eat the next night either. His mother came home on Friday with groceries and found him asleep on the kitchen floor because he'd been too weak to make it to his bed. She never found out why. That night, the night he went hungry, he pulled a pencil from his backpack and wrote 4 words on a piece of paper. He folded it up, he put it in his pocket, and he made a promise. Not to God, not to his mother, to himself. If he ever had the power to stop it, no one around him would go hungry again. He was 9 when he made that promise. He'd kept it for 45 years. Every food drive, every coat donation, every quiet envelope slid under a door. Every Thanksgiving turkey left on a porch with no name attached. Every kid he'd ever seen sitting alone at a table with nothing in front of them. He'd fixed it. Quietly, without credit, without fanfare. But today was different. Today he'd heard his own voice coming out of a 5-year-old girl's mouth. "They won't let me eat." And it cracked open something he thought he'd sealed shut decades ago. He folded the paper back up, put it in the wallet, put the wallet in his vest, and he sat there until the stars came out and Hank turned off the station lights. "You can sleep on the cot and back if you need," Hank called out. "I'm all right. You don't look all right." "I'm not, but I will be." He rode to the motel in Greenville. His crew was in the bar next door. He could hear Tank's laugh through the wall. He didn't join them. He walked to the long wooden table in the meeting room, sat down under the single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling, and stared at his hands. Big hands, scarred, cracked knuckles, hands that had built things and broken things in equal measure, hands that had held his mother's hand when she died, hands that had carried coffins, hands that had pulled a man from a burning car on I-65 and never told anyone about it. He whispered something he hadn't said out loud in 30 years. "I was that kid." The words fell into the empty room and stayed there. He didn't sleep that night. At dawn, he rode back to Hollow Creek alone. He parked across the street from the Golden Plate and waited. At 6:15, Jenna pulled up in a beat-up Honda Civic with a cracked taillight. She got out, saw the Harley, and stopped. "You came back," she said. "I need to know more." They talked in the parking lot. Jenna kept glancing at the diner door, watching for Victor. "Rachel and Emma," Axel said. "Tell me everything." Rachel moved here 2 years ago, right after Emma's father left. She didn't have anyone, no family, no friends, nothing. She just picked a town on a map and drove until the car stopped. That car broke down right here on Main Street. Hank towed it to a station. That's how she ended up in Hollow Creek. And Emma's condition? It's muscular. I don't know the medical name, but it's in her legs. She's had 4 surgeries. 4. And she's 5 years old. The doctors say there might be more. Rachel drives her to Louisville every month for treatment. 3 hours each way. She does it on no sleep, on empty, on fumes. Where's the money going? Medical bills, therapy, equipment. That wheelchair alone costs more than Rachel makes in 3 months. Insurance covers some of it, but not enough. Never enough. Axel was quiet for a moment. And the father? Jenna's face hardened. Gone. Packed a bag the week after the diagnosis. Told Rachel he didn't sign up for this. Those were his words. She hasn't heard from him since. Not a call, not a text, not a single dollar for his daughter. Axel's hands curled into fists at his sides. He uncurled them, slowly. "You tried to pay for the waffle," he said, "out of my tips. Victor saw me reaching for my apron and stopped me before I could pull out a dime. He said, 'If you give away food, you're stealing from me. Do it again and you're fired.' I've got 2 kids of my own, sir. I couldn't lose this job." "Don't call me sir. Name's Axel." "Axel, I wanted to help her. I need you to know that." "I know. I've tried before. There was a homeless man last winter. He came in shaking, frozen, asking for hot coffee. I poured him a cup. Victor dumped it in the sink in front of him and told him to leave. I've never been so ashamed of a place I work in my entire life." Axel absorbed it, every word. He stored it the way a man stores ammunition, carefully, knowing it would be needed. "One more question," he said. "The cook, Charlie, where is he?" "Last I heard, he's fixing cars at his cousin's shop on Route 12. He's not a mechanic, he's a cook. Best I've ever seen. But Victor fired him for giving extra fries to a kid. Extra fries. And Charlie couldn't find another kitchen job in this town because Victor called every restaurant owner he knew and told them Charlie was a thief." Axel stared at her. He blackballed him. Over French fries. Something locked into place behind Axel's eyes. Something final. "Thank you, Jenna. What are you going to do?" He didn't answer. He got on his bike and rode to the county clinic on the edge of town. Rachel was in the waiting room. Emma was in her wheelchair beside her, drawing on a napkin with a purple crayon. When Axel walked through the door, Emma's face lit up like someone had turned on every light in the building. "Mr. Biker," she shouted. 2 nurses looked up. Rachel stood so fast she knocked her purse off the chair. What are you doing here?" Rachel said. "Came to check on her." Emma was already rolling toward him, pushing her wheels with both hands, grinning so wide her eyes nearly disappeared. Look what I made." She held up the napkin. Purple crayon, crooked lines. Axel took it carefully, the way a man handles something breakable. It was a drawing. 3 motorcycles, or something shaped like motorcycles. A stick figure girl with a circle for a body and 2 lines for arms. A big yellow shape next to her that might have been a waffle. And at the top, in wobbly, uneven letters that leaned in different directions, "Thank you for letting me eat." Axel's throat closed. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, twice, 3 times. It didn't help. He knelt beside her, eye level, the same way he'd done in the diner. "Can I keep this?" "You have to," Emma said, matter of fact, absolute, the way only a 5-year-old can be. "You saved me." That word, saved, it hit him in the center of his chest. Not like a punch, like a key turning in a lock that hadn't been opened in decades. He felt something release, something ancient, something that had been wound so tight for so long he'd forgotten it was there. His hand found the armrest of her wheelchair. He held on, not for support, for connection. "Nobody saved you, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. "You were brave all on your own." "But I was scared," Emma whispered. "That's what brave means, being scared and doing it anyway." Rachel watched them. She had one hand pressed against her heart and the other covering her mouth, and she didn't trust herself to speak. Axel stood. He looked at Rachel. "She's something else." "She's everything," Rachel said. He carefully folded the napkin and placed it inside his wallet, right next to the yellow piece of paper. 2 promises, 45 years apart, both made by children who deserved better than the world gave them. He rode back to the diner. Jenna was on her lunch break, sitting on the back steps. He handed her the napkin. "Pin this on the wall," he said, "next to the old photos, next to Henry." Jenna unfolded it, read the words. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God!" "Right next to him, where people can see it. Victor will tear it down. Not for long, he won't." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" But Axel was already walking to his bike. He rode to Greenville. He walked into the motel bar where his crew was nursing afternoon beers and watching a ball game nobody cared about. He pulled Emma's drawing from his wallet. He unfolded it. He laid it flat on the table under the light. Purple crayon on a white napkin. Crooked motorcycles. A stick figure girl with a waffle. 7 words that broke him wide open. "This," he said, "is why we ride." Nobody laughed. Nobody joked. Tank set down his beer. Old Earl took off his glasses and leaned forward. Axel told them everything. Jenna's story, Rachel's story, Charlie the cook, blackballed over French fries, Victor dumping coffee in front of a freezing man, old Henry who never let anyone leave hungry, and Victor who turned his father's legacy into something cold and cruel. "That little girl drew this for me," Axel said. "She wrote, 'Thank you for letting me eat.' She's 5 years old, and she thanked a stranger for permission to eat a waffle. You understand what that means? She's learned, already at 5, that food is something you have to earn, that hungry is something you're supposed to be quiet about." He paused. The room was dead silent. "I know what that feels like. Some of you know what that feels like. And I made a promise a long time ago that if I ever had the power to stop it, I would." He flattened both palms on the table. "Tomorrow morning we're buying that diner." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Questions fired from every direction. How much? Where's the money? Is Victor going to sell? What do we know about running a diner? Axel raised one hand. The room went quiet. "We buy the diner. We fix it up. We bring back Charlie. We reopen it the way Henry built it. With one rule." He looked at every face in the room. "Nobody who walks through that door hungry ever gets turned away. Not for money, not for pride, not for anything. Not ever." "That's not a business plan," someone said from the back. "No," Axel said. "It's a promise." Silence. Long. Heavy. Old Earl stood up. Earl was 68, a mechanic, hands like worn leather. He never spoke at meetings. In 30 years, he'd never once raised his voice in this room. "I've been riding with this club 30 years, Earl said. His voice was gravel and dust. 30 years, and this is the first time someone's asked me to ride for something I'd be proud to tell my grandkids about." He put his hand flat on the table next to Axel's. "I'm in." Tank stood, slammed his palm down. "In." One by one, every man in that room, hand after hand, palm after palm on the table until it sounded like thunder. Every single one. Axel looked at the drawing on the table, the stick figure girl, the wobbly letters, the purple crayon motorcycles. We ride at dawn. And that night, while his brothers slept, Axel sat alone at the table under the bare bulb. He pulled out his wallet. He placed the yellow paper next to the napkin drawing, side by side. A 9-year-old boy's promise and a 5-year-old girl's gratitude, 45 years apart, connected by the same truth. He picked up his phone, dialed a number. A man answered on the second ring, groggy, confused. Charlie Boudreau? Who's this? My name's Axel. I heard you're the best cook in Hollow Creek. I was, until I got fired for giving a kid extra fries. How'd you like to come back? Long pause. Axel could hear the man breathing on the other end. You serious? Dead serious. Same kitchen, double the pay, one condition. What's that? Nobody leaves hungry. Charlie Boudreau was quiet for 10 seconds. Then his voice came back thick and broken. Mister, I've been waiting 3 years for someone to say that. Axel hung up. He looked at the drawing one more time, touched the wobbly letters with his fingertip. Then he folded it carefully, placed it back in his wallet, next to the promise he'd carried for 45 years. 2 pieces of paper, 2 children, one man who finally understood what the road had been leading him toward all along. He killed the light, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Axel slept without dreaming. Axel was awake before the sun. He'd told them 20, maybe 25 if they were lucky. That's what he expected. 20 brothers willing to ride 3 hours on a Tuesday morning for a diner they'd never eaten in and a girl they'd never met. Tank had other plans. Tank had been on the phone until 2 in the morning. He'd called Louisville. He'd called Lexington. He'd called as far south as Nashville and as far east as Ashland. He didn't pitch it like a charity run. He didn't pitch it like a business deal. He pitched it the only way Tank knew how, straight. A 5-year-old girl in a wheelchair got turned away from a diner because her mama's card declined on a $4 waffle. She said, "They won't let me eat." Axel heard it. We're buying the place and turning it into what it should have been all along. You in or you out. Nobody said out. Axel walked into the motel parking lot at 5:30 in the morning and stopped dead. Motorcycles. Everywhere. Not 20, not 25. They stretched down both sides of the road as far as he could see in the gray pre-dawn light. Chrome and steel and leather. Engines ticking in the cold. Riders standing in clusters, breath rising like smoke, coffee cups in gloved hands. Tank was leaning against his bike, arms crossed, grinning. How many? Axel said. 53. Axel stared at him. 53. Louisville sent 18. Lexington sent 12. Nashville sent 9. The rest are independents who heard about it on the wire and drove through the night. Tank shrugged. Turns out people care about a hungry kid. Who knew? A rider from Nashville, young, maybe 25, fresh patch on his vest, walked up to Axel. My name's Cole. I drove 4 hours to be here. My little sister's in a wheelchair, spina bifida. She's 7. When I heard what happened to that girl, I couldn't stay home. Axel gripped his hand. Glad you're here. Where do you need me? Right behind me. At 6 o'clock, Axel mounted his Harley. He looked back at the line behind him. 53 machines, 53 riders, 53 people who showed up because a child's voice reached them across highways and state lines and the cold indifference of a world that usually looks the other way. He kicked the engine. The sound split the morning open. Behind him, 52 more engines roared to life. The noise was enormous, physical. It didn't just fill the air, it pressed against your chest, rattled your teeth, shook the ground under your boots. Birds exploded from the trees along the highway. A dog in a farmyard howled. They rode in formation, 2 abreast, a column of thunder stretching a quarter-mile down the highway. They hit Hollow Creek at 7 in the morning. The sound reached the town before they did. It rolled through the streets like an earthquake. Dishes rattled in kitchen cabinets. Windows shook in their frames. An old man sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee watched the column come around the bend and slowly stood up. A woman in a bathrobe came to her front door, looked out, and called for her husband. A kid on a bicycle stopped in the middle of the street, mouth open, counting. 53 Harley-Davidsons turned onto Main Street and parked on both sides of the road in front of the Golden Plate Diner. One by one, the engines died. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Hollow Creek had ever heard. Axel dismounted. He pulled the check from his vest pocket. He'd had it prepared the night before, signed, certified, drawn from the club's account, and walked toward the front door. Jenna was already inside. She'd been there since 5:30, the way she always was, because Victor didn't pay overtime, but she came early anyway to make sure the coffee was hot before the regulars arrived. She heard the engines. She went to the window. She counted. She stopped counting at 40. The bell above the door jingled. Axel walked in. Behind him, through the glass, 52 riders stood in the parking lot, silent, waiting. Jenna's eyes were huge. How many for breakfast? All of them. But first I need to talk to your boss. He's in the back. He heard the engines. I think he's calling. The office door slammed open. Victor burst out, face red, sweat on his forehead, phone in his hand. His eyes darted from Axel to the window, to the parking lot, to the army of leather and chrome standing outside his diner. I called the police, Victor said. His voice was shaking. He held up the phone like a weapon. They're on their way. You have 5 minutes. I don't need 5 minutes, Axel said. I need 30 seconds. This is private property. You can't just... We're here to make you an offer. Axel pulled the check from his vest. He unfolded it. He laid it flat on the counter and slid it toward Victor. We want to buy the diner. Victor looked at the check. His eyes narrowed. Then they widened. The angry red in his face drained to white. That's 3 months' profit, Axel said. Cash deal, clean money, every dollar accounted for. Sign the papers, hand over the keys, walk away clean. Victor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're insane. Maybe. You can't just walk into a man's business and demand he sell. I'm not demanding, I'm offering. There's a difference. This place has been in my family for 40 years. My father built it. And there it was, the opening Axel had been waiting for. The door Victor walked through without realizing he'd never be able to walk back out. Your father, Axel said. His voice dropped. Not louder, lower. The kind of low that makes people lean in, that fills a room by emptying it. Let's talk about your father. Victor stiffened. Don't you talk about my father. Your father built this place to feed people. That was the whole point. That was the only point. Henry Dalton put up these walls and fired up that grill because he believed that nobody in his town should go hungry. He gave free pie to anyone having a bad day. He kept soup on the stove every winter for people who couldn't pay. Half this town still talks about him like he was a saint. Shut your mouth. He never turned anyone away, not once. In 40 years, not one person walked out of this diner hungry. That was his legacy. That was what he built. I said, shut your... And then you took over. Axel's voice didn't rise. It hardened, like metal cooling. You raised prices. You cut portions. You fired the best cook this town ever had because he gave a kid extra fries. You dumped hot coffee in the sink in front of a freezing man on Christmas Eve. You threatened to fire your own waitress for trying to use her tips to pay for a stranger's meal. Victor's phone hand dropped to his side. His chest rose and fell. His eyes were locked on Axel like a man watching a train coming and knowing he can't move. And 2 days ago, Axel said, you stood right there, right where you're standing now, and you told a 5-year-old girl in a wheelchair to get out of this diner because her mother's car didn't work. A little girl who just spent 3 weeks in the hospital. A little girl who asked for one waffle. One, and you told her to leave. Her card was declined. I run a business, I can't just... Her name is Emma. Victor stopped. Her name is Emma, and she's 5 years old, and she drew me a picture on a napkin. Purple crayon. You want to know what she wrote? Axel reached into his wallet. He pulled out the napkin. He unfolded it and held it up so Victor could see every wobbly letter. Thank you for letting me eat. That's what she wrote. A 5-year-old girl thanked a stranger for letting her eat. In your father's diner. In the place Henry Dalton built so that exact sentence would never need to be said. Victor's face crumbled. Not all at once, slowly, the way a wall cracks before it falls. The lines appear first, thin and quiet, and then the whole thing gives way. Your father would be ashamed. The words landed like a hammer on glass. Victor flinched, physically. His whole body jerked as if he'd been struck. His jaw clenched. His eyes went wet. Not from sadness, not from guilt. From the shock of hearing spoken aloud the truth he'd been hiding from himself for 3 years. The diner was silent. Jenna stood behind the counter with both hands pressed flat on the surface, tears streaming down her face. Through the window, 52 riders stood motionless. Victor looked at Jenna. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She just looked at him with 2 years of pain and frustration and disappointment written across every line of her face. He looked at the check on the counter. He looked at the old photographs on the wall behind the register. His father, apron, flower, that smile. He looked at the napkin in Axel's hand, purple crayon, crooked motorcycles, a stick figure girl and a waffle, and 7 words that were a mirror he couldn't turn away from. You know what the worst part is? Victor said. His voice was different now, thin, stripped. I heard her. I heard that little girl say those words, and I felt nothing. I stood right here, and I felt nothing. His hands were shaking. What kind of man feels nothing when a child says that? Axel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Victor picked up the check. He held it for a long time. His thumb moved across the number, back and forth, like a man trying to read Braille. My father kept a napkin in his desk, Victor said. Did you know that? No. When he first built this place, he had 2 names picked out. My mother wanted the golden plate. She said it sounded elegant. My father wanted something else. She talked him out of it, but he wrote it on a napkin and kept it in his desk drawer for 40 years. I found it when I cleaned out his office after he died. What was the name? Victor's voice broke. Kindness Kitchen. The words hung in the air between them. Axel felt something shift, not just in the room, but in the story itself, as if the universe had been holding its breath and finally let go. He wanted to call this place Kindness Kitchen, Victor repeated, and I turned it into a place that tells hungry children to leave. He folded the check, put it in his shirt pocket, pressed his hand flat against it. It's yours, he said. The room exhaled. Not just Jenna, not just Axel. The room itself, the walls, the counter, the old booths Henry had built with his own hands. 50 people outside the window breathing at the same time. Axel extended his hand. Victor looked at it, then he took it. His grip was weak. His hand was damp, but he held on. One more thing, Axel said. What? The sign out front. I'm changing it. Victor nodded. He already knew. Within an hour, the transformation began. Tank organized the crews like a general on a battlefield. Riders who'd come to buy a diner stayed to rebuild one. They ripped off old wallpaper with their bare hands. They repainted walls. They sanded booths and restained the wood. A rider from Nashville who built houses for a living measured the front entrance, drove to the hardware store, and came back with lumber. By noon, he'd built a wheelchair ramp. Nobody asked him to. Nobody paid him. He just built it. Charlie Boudreau walked through the back door at 10 in the morning. He stood in the kitchen, his kitchen, the kitchen he'd been fired from 8 months ago, and pressed both hands flat on the grill that had gone cold without him. Hey, old friend, he whispered to it. He turned on the gas. The flame caught. The grill hissed, and Charlie closed his eyes and breathed in deep, the way a man breathes when he finally comes home. Jenna found him there 20 minutes later. She threw her arms around him and sobbed into his shoulder. "I missed you so much. I missed this kitchen more than I missed my ex-wife," Charlie said, and she laughed so hard she had to hold onto the counter. They framed Emma's napkin drawing and hung it behind the counter, right next to old Henry's photograph. Purple crayon beside black and white history, a 5-year-old girl's gratitude next to a dead man's legacy. Jenna stood back and looked at them side by side. "Henry would have loved her," she said. "Henry would have never let it happen in the first place," Charlie said quietly. By late afternoon, the work was done. New paint, new ramp, booths restored, kitchen cleaned and restocked. Charlie had already made a test batch of waffles using his grandmother's recipe, the one Victor had replaced with a frozen mix to save money. Axel stood outside with Tank. Above the door, 2 riders on a ladder were removing the old sign. In its place, they hung a new one, hand-painted, simple. 4 words in white letters on dark wood. "Kindness served here." Tank looked at it. "You think Henry would have approved?" "I think Henry would have helped us paint it." The riders started their bikes and began pulling out. One by one, handshakes, backslaps, a few hugs. Cole, the young rider from Nashville, found Axel before he left. "I'm telling my sister about this," Cole said. "She's going to want to meet Emma. Bring her anytime. She eats free." "Everyone eats free?" "Everyone who needs to." Cole gripped his hand. "You changed something today, man. I don't know what, but something's different." Axel watched him ride off. Then the parking lot was empty. Just Axel, Tank, Jenna, and Charlie. And then just after 6 o'clock, a car pulled into the lot. Slow, headlights cutting through the dusk. Victor got out. He stood in the parking lot, staring at the new sign. His hands hung at his sides. His face was unreadable. Not angry, not sad, not anything that had a simple name. Axel walked out. They stood 10 feet apart. "I didn't expect you back," Axel said. "Neither did I." "You here to fight this?" "No." Victor's voice was quiet, hollowed out. "I'm here because I went home, and I opened my father's desk, the drawer where he kept that napkin. I hadn't opened it since the day I found it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folded napkin. Old, yellow, fragile. "Kindness Kitchen," Victor said. His handwriting. He wrote it the day he came up with the idea for this place. Before the building, before the name, before any of it. This was the first thing. He held it out. "I want you to have it." Axel took it, unfolded it, looked at the old handwriting, careful, deliberate, the kind of penmanship that belongs to a man who knew the weight of words. "It should be here," Axel said. "In the diner, where it belongs." "I know," Victor swallowed hard. "That's why I brought it." They stood in silence for a moment. "I want to come back," Victor said. "As what?" "I don't know, whatever you'll let me. I'll wash dishes. I'll mop floors. I don't care." "You want to wash dishes in your father's diner." "I want to earn the right to stand in my father's diner." Axel studied him. This was not the same man who told a 5-year-old girl to leave. That man had been wearing a mask. Confidence, cruelty, control, and the mask was gone now. What stood in front of Axel was something raw and exposed and terrified. "You want to learn humility?" Axel said. "I want to learn whatever my father knew that I forgot." "Then you start at the sink, 6 in the morning, every day. That's where your father started, and that's where you start." Victor nodded. His eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them. "One more thing," Axel said. "What?" "That little girl, Emma, if she ever walks through that door again, and she will, you look her in the eye. You don't look away. You don't hide in the back. You stand there and you face what you did, and then you make it right." Victor's chin trembled. "How do I make that right?" "You spend the rest of your life making sure no one ever has to say those words again. Not in this diner. Not in this town. Not anywhere you have the power to stop it. Victor pressed his hand against his chest, over his heart, over the place where the check sat in his shirt pocket. I will, he said, and for the first time since his father died, maybe the first time in his entire adult life, Victor smiled. Not the smug smile, not the cruel smile, not the smile of a man who enjoys power. A real smile, small, broken, the kind that comes after something inside you collapses, and you realize that the rubble is actually a foundation. Axel reached out and put his hand on Victor's shoulder. Heavy, firm, not a threat, an anchor. Your father didn't build this place for money, Victor. He built it for moments. The moment someone walks in cold and leaves warm. The moment a kid takes a bite and smiles. The moment a stranger becomes a neighbor because someone put a plate in front of them and said, "You're welcome here." Victor broke. Right there in the parking lot. He covered his face with both hands and his shoulders shook, and the sound that came out of him was not crying. It was something deeper, something that had been locked in a vault for 3 years and finally found the door open. Axel didn't move. He kept his hand on Victor's shoulder and let him fall apart. When it was over, Victor wiped his face with his sleeve. He straightened up. He looked at the sign above the door. Kindness served here. 6 in the morning, Victor said. 6 in the morning. Victor got in his car. He sat behind the wheel for a full minute before he started the engine. Then he pulled out of the lot and drove away. Axel stood alone in front of the diner. The new sign glowed in the last light of the day. Inside, through the window, he could see Emma's drawing hanging next to Henry's photograph. And now, beside them both, Henry's napkin, the one that said Kindness Kitchen in an old man's careful hand. 3 pieces of paper, 3 generations of hope. Axel pulled out his wallet. He opened it. He looked at his own piece of paper, yellow, brittle, 4 words in a child's handwriting. I won't forget this. He pressed his thumb against the words. Then he closed the wallet, put it back in his vest, and walked inside. Charlie was still in the kitchen. The grill was hot. The smell of butter and batter filled the air. Charlie. Yeah, boss? Make me a waffle. Charlie grinned. Hearts? Axel almost laughed. Almost. Yeah, he said. Hearts. Charlie's waffles hit the first plates at 6:15 in the morning. He'd been in the kitchen since 4. Couldn't sleep. Didn't want to. He'd spent 8 months fixing engines in his cousin's garage, grease under his nails instead of flour. And every single day he'd thought about this grill. His grill. The grill his grandmother stood him in front of when he was 11 years old and said, "Food ain't about eating, baby. It's about telling somebody they matter." He'd made the batter from scratch. His grandmother's recipe, the one Victor had thrown out and replaced with a frozen mix from a food service catalog. Buttermilk, real vanilla, a pinch of cinnamon that nobody could ever identify, but everybody tasted. The recipe wasn't written down anywhere. It lived in Charlie's hands, in the way he folded the batter instead of stirring it, in the way he let it rest for exactly 12 minutes, in the way he knew, by sound alone, when the waffle iron was ready. Jenna arrived at 5:30. She walked through the front door and stopped. The smell hit her first. Butter and batter and cinnamon and something else. Something that didn't have a name but felt like coming home. Charlie, she whispered. Back here. She walked into the kitchen. Charlie was standing at the grill in a clean white apron, a towel over his shoulder, his hands moving the way they always moved. Fast, sure, deliberate. Like a musician who'd been away from his instrument and couldn't stop playing. You've been here since 4? She said. 3:30. Couldn't help myself. The batter. Grandma's, every drop. Jenna pressed her hands against her cheeks. Oh, Charlie, people are going to lose their minds. That's the plan. By 6 o'clock, the line was out the door. Word had traveled the way word travels in small towns. Not through newspapers or social media, but through phone calls and porch conversations. and the simple, unstoppable machinery of people talking to people. Martha at the post office told Frank at the hardware store, who told his wife, who told her sister, who called everyone in her church group. By dawn, half of Hollow Creek knew that the golden plate had changed hands. Charlie was back, and breakfast was free. Free. That word alone would have brought a crowd. But it wasn't the free food that packed the diner that morning. It was the sign. Kindness served here. People who hadn't set foot in the golden plate since Henry died were standing on the sidewalk at 6 in the morning, reading those 3 words like scripture. Axel worked the door. He didn't plan to. He'd planned to stay in the back, let Jenna and Charlie run the show. But when the first customer walked in, an old woman named Dorothy, 81 years old, Henry's neighbor for 30 years, she took one look at the place and froze. "Oh," she said, just that. "Oh." She was looking at the wall behind the counter, Henry's photograph, Emma's drawing, Henry's napkin, 3 pieces of paper telling one story. "It smells like Henry's," Dorothy said, her voice cracked. "It smells exactly like Henry's." "That's because Charlie's back," Jenna said. Dorothy sat in the booth closest to the counter, Henry's favorite booth, the one he'd sit in every evening after closing, drinking coffee and reading the paper. She put her hands flat on the table. She closed her eyes. "Welcome home, Dorothy," Jenna said, setting a cup of coffee in front of her. Dorothy opened her eyes. They were swimming. "I haven't been in here since Henry passed. I couldn't. Victor, he changed everything. The smell was wrong. The feeling was wrong. It wasn't Henry's place anymore." "It is now," Jenna said. Dorothy took a sip of coffee. Her face changed. "This is Henry's blend. Charlie found it. Same supplier, same roast." Dorothy set the cup down and wept. Right there in the booth, an 81-year-old woman crying into her hands over a cup of coffee because it tasted like a man she'd loved like family. Axel saw it from across the room. He didn't go over. Some moments belong to the person having them. The crowd kept coming. Farmers who hadn't eaten here in years. Retirees who remembered Henry's Christmas dinners. Young couples who'd only known Victor's version of the place. They walked in, they read the sign, they smelled Charlie's cooking, and something in their faces shifted. Not everyone cried, but everyone felt it. By 9 o'clock, they'd served over 100 meals. Charlie was a machine. He worked the grill and the stove simultaneously, calling out orders like a conductor leading an orchestra. 2 waffles golden, 3 eggs over easy, bacon crispy on table 9. Jenna moved between tables at a pace that would have killed most people by the second hour. She didn't slow down. She didn't complain. She smiled at every single person who sat down, and she meant it every single time. Victor arrived at 6 on the dot, head down, no eye contact. He walked straight to the kitchen, picked up the dish gloves, and started washing. Nobody spoke to him, not at first. Charlie glanced at him once, then looked away. Jenna walked past him 3 times without a word. The silence around Victor was thick and intentional and deserved. He didn't complain. He washed dishes. Plate after plate, cup after cup. His hands, the hands that had counted money and crossed arms and pointed at a woman and her daughter to get out, were now buried in hot water and soap. His sleeves were rolled up. His collar was damp. His back ached within an hour. He kept washing. At 8:30, a farmer named Roy walked into the kitchen to return a plate. He saw Victor at the sink and stopped cold. "Well, I'll be damned," Roy said. "Victor Dalton, washing dishes." Victor didn't look up. "Morning, Roy. Your daddy washed dishes too. Right there at that sink, every night after closing. Said a man who owns a restaurant but won't clean a plate doesn't deserve to own anything." Victor's hands stopped moving. He stared into the water. "I know." "Did you know, or did you forget?" Victor swallowed. "I forgot." Roy set the plate on the counter. "Well, looks like you're remembering." He walked out. Victor stood at the sink for a long moment, water dripping from his fingers. Then he picked up the next plate and kept going. At 10 o'clock, a van from the local news station pulled up. A reporter and a cameraman. Someone had called them. Axel never found out who. Axel didn't want to talk to them. He had no interest in cameras or stories or anything that required him to stand still and explain himself. But Jenna pulled him aside. "You have to," she said. "Not for you, for Emma, for Rachel, for this place. People need to hear what happened here. I'm not good at talking. You're good at the truth. That's enough." He gave one interview. Standing outside the diner, the sign visible behind him. The reporter was young, earnest, nervous around bikers. "Can you tell us what happened?" she asked. Axel looked into the camera. He didn't rehearse. He didn't polish. He just talked. "A few days ago, I walked into this diner and heard something I'll never forget. A 5-year-old girl in a wheelchair. Her mother's card had been declined over a $4 waffle. And the owner told them to leave. In front of a room full of people. And that little girl looked at her mother and said, 'They won't let me eat, Mommy.'" He paused, not for effect, because the words still hit him every time he said them. There were 30 adults in that room. Not one of them moved. Not one of them stood up. Not one of them reached into their pocket and said, "I got this." 30 people sat there and watched a 5-year-old girl get told she couldn't eat. "And you bought the diner," the reporter said. "We bought the diner. We brought back the cook who was fired for being too generous. We reopened with one rule. Nobody who walks through that door hungry gets turned away. Period." Why? Why go this far for a stranger? Axel thought about the trailer park, about the $3.40, about the word freeloader and the 2 nights without food and the note he'd written to himself at 9 years old. "Because kindness isn't charity," he said. "It's not weakness. It's not something you do when it's convenient. It's something you do because it's right. You feed people because they're hungry. You stand up because sitting down is how the whole world goes wrong." What do you want people to take away from this? I want them to remember that it only takes one person. One. The room was full and nobody moved. Then we walked in and everything changed. You don't need 53 people on motorcycles. You need one person willing to say, "Not on my watch." That's it. That's all it takes. The interview aired at noon. By 6 in the evening, it had 500,000 views online. By the next morning, over 1 million. News outlets from across the state picked it up. Then national outlets. Then international. A biker gang buys a diner for a hungry girl in a wheelchair. The headline wrote itself. Axel didn't see any of it. When the video crossed 1 million views, he was in the kitchen, washing dishes, right next to Victor. They didn't talk for the first 20 minutes. The only sound was water and clinking plates and Charlie's voice calling orders from the grill. "You do this every night?" Victor finally said. "Somebody has to." "My father did this every night." "I know," Roy told me. Victor was quiet for a moment. "I never washed a single dish when my father was alive. Not one. He'd be back here at 11 o'clock every night, cleaning up, and I'd be in the office counting receipts. He asked me once to help. Just once. I told him to hire someone." Axel said nothing. He didn't hire someone. He just kept washing, every night, by himself. Sounds like him. "I didn't deserve this place," Victor said. "I didn't deserve anything he built." Axel set a plate in the rack. "Maybe not, but you're here now. That counts for something." "Does it?" "Ask me again in 6 months." The first week was brutal for Victor. Cold shoulders everywhere. Customers who recognized him turned away. An old man walked in, saw Victor at the sink, and walked right back out. A woman told Jenna she wouldn't eat in a restaurant where that man was allowed to work. But Victor showed up every morning, 6 o'clock, head down, dishes, floors, taking out trash. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't explain himself. He just worked. On the 4th day, something shifted. Small, almost invisible. Victor was clearing a table when an elderly woman, Margaret, 83, shaky hands, a regular since Henry's time, couldn't find her wallet. She dug through her purse, frantic, embarrassed, her face turning red. Victor watched her for 3 seconds. Then he walked to the counter, poured a cup of coffee, and set it in front of her. "On the house, ma'am," he said. Margaret looked up at him. She didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She studied him, the way you study someone you're deciding whether to trust. "Henry used to do that," she said. "I know," Victor said. "I'm trying to learn." Margaret picked up the coffee. She took a sip. She nodded once. Just once, but it was enough. Jenna saw the whole thing from behind the counter. That night after closing, she folded a clean dish towel and left it on Victor's station with a note tucked inside. "You're getting there." Victor found it the next morning. He read it. He folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket next to his heart, and he didn't take it out for the rest of the day. 2 weeks passed. The diner never slowed down. Charlie's waffles became legendary. People drove from 3 counties away just to taste them. Regulars started calling them Emma's Waffles. Charlie didn't correct them. He liked the name. He liked that every time someone ordered one, they were saying her name, keeping her in the room even when she wasn't there. The grocery store down the street put up a collection jar next to the register. Handwritten label, Emma's Steps. Nobody organized it. Nobody asked permission. The owner just did it. Within a week, it was full. He emptied it, counted it, $412, and brought it to the diner in an envelope. "For the girl," he told Jenna, "for whatever she needs." The elementary school held a fundraiser. Kids sold lemonade and cookies in the parking lot. They raised $600. The principal brought a giant check, the kind you see on TV, and the kids all signed it with markers. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, someone had written, "We love you, Emma." Cards started arriving at the diner, from strangers, from other states. A woman in Ohio sent a hand-knitted blanket covered in stars. "I heard she likes stars." A man in Georgia sent a check for $50 with a note. "I was a hungry kid once too." A little boy in Michigan sent a drawing of a waffle with a note that said, "You can have mine." Jenna pinned them all on the wall. The wall behind the counter grew. Henry's photo, Emma's drawing, Henry's napkin, and now dozens of cards and letters in children's drawings. A mosaic of kindness built one piece at a time by people who'd never met Emma but felt her in their chests. And then, on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the diner reopened, an envelope arrived with no return address. Jenna opened it at the counter. Inside was a photograph. She looked at it. Her hand flew to her mouth. The envelope slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. "Charlie," she said. Her voice was barely there. "Charlie, come here." Charlie came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak. She held up the photograph. Charlie took it. He tilted his head. Then his whole face changed. His mouth opened. His eyes filled. He gripped the edge of the counter with his free hand. "Oh my God," he said. The photograph showed a hospital hallway, white floors, fluorescent lights, and in the center of the frame, a little girl with blonde curls. Not sitting, not in a wheelchair, standing. Emma was standing. Both hands gripped a metal walker. Her face was twisted with effort, lips pressed tight, eyebrows drawn together, every muscle in her small body fighting for something the doctors said might never happen. Her legs were trembling. Her knuckles were white on the walker handles. Behind her, Rachel was crying, both hands over her mouth. Her whole body bent forward as if she wanted to run to her daughter, but was forcing herself to stay back. In front of Emma, a doctor knelt on the floor with his arms open, waiting. At the bottom of the photograph in Rachel's handwriting, "She took her first steps yesterday. The surgery worked. She's walking, little by little." Jenna sobbed, out loud. In the middle of the morning rush, she didn't care. She held the photo against her chest and cried the way people cry when something broken starts to heal. Charlie took off his apron. He walked out of the kitchen and straight to Axel, who was fixing a loose hinge on the front door. "You need to see this," Charlie said. "Right now." Axel took the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. His face didn't move. His body didn't move. He stood perfectly still and stared at a little girl standing on her own two legs in a hospital hallway. And something behind his eyes shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. His throat worked. No sound came out. He tried again. "She's standing," he said. His voice was wrecked, barely recognizable. "She's standing," Charlie said. Tank was at the counter. He'd come in for breakfast, same as every morning. Jenna handed him the photo without a word. Tank looked at it. His jaw clenched. His nostrils flared. He set the photo down gently, so gently as if it might break, and turned away. He pressed his fist against his mouth. His shoulders shook once. "Damn allergies," he muttered. His voice was thick as concrete. Jenna took the photograph and pinned it on the wall, right next to Emma's drawing, right next to Henry's photograph, right next to the napkin that said, "Kindness Kitchen." 3 pieces telling the whole story. A drawing from a girl who couldn't eat, a photograph of a girl who couldn't walk, and in between the proof that when people choose to show up, really show up, the impossible doesn't stay impossible for long. Victor stood in the back, dish towel over his shoulder. He'd seen the photo from across the room. He hadn't come closer. He didn't feel he had the right, but his eyes were fixed on it, and the tears on his face were the quietest tears he'd ever shed. Jenna noticed. She walked over and stood beside him. "You want to see it up close?" she asked. "I don't think I deserve to." "That's exactly why you should." She took his hand, the hand that had pointed at the door, and told a mother and her daughter to leave, and she led him to the wall. Victor stood in front of the photograph. He looked at Emma, standing, fighting, winning. "She's brave," he whispered. "She always was," Jenna said, "even when you couldn't see it." Victor reached out and touched the edge of the photograph with his fingertip, gently, the way you touch something holy. "I'm sorry," he said, not to Jenna, not to Axel, not to anyone in the room. He said it to the photograph, to the little girl in it, to the moment he'd stolen from her and the moments he could never give back. He lowered his hand. He walked back to the sink. He picked up a plate, and he washed it. That night, after everyone had gone, Axel sat alone in the diner. The lights were off except for the one behind the counter, the one that lit up the wall. Henry's photo, Emma's drawing, the napkin, the photograph, the cards, the letters, the children's drawings. He pulled out his wallet. He unfolded the yellow paper. "I won't forget this." He held it next to the wall. A 9-year-old boy's promise, standing guard beside a 5-year-old girl's miracle. He pinned it there, right in the center, his own piece of the story, finally where it belonged. Then he sat in Emma's booth, the booth where everything started, and he put his head in his hands, not crying, not breaking, just resting. The way a man rests when he's carried something heavy for 45 years and finally sets it down. Outside, the sign glowed against the dark Kentucky sky. Kindness served here. And inside, on a wall covered in paper and memory and love, a 9-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl held the same truth between them. That hunger is not about food, that kindness is not about money, and that the smallest voice in the room can change everything if someone is brave enough to listen. 3 weeks had passed since 53 motorcycles shook the windows of Hollow Creek. 21 days. That's how long it took for a diner to become a church. Not the kind with pews and hymnals. The kind where people walked in broken and left whole. Where a plate of food was a prayer answered. Where a cook named Charlie turned flour and butter into something that tasted like forgiveness. Axel was wiping down the counter after the lunch rush. His hands moved in slow circles, the same hands that had gripped handlebars across 36 states, the same hands that had laid $200 on this counter and changed everything. He developed a rhythm in these 3 weeks. Mornings he worked the door, afternoons he cleaned, evenings he sat with Charlie and went over the books. He didn't know much about running a restaurant, but he knew about showing up. And that, it turned out, was most of what mattered. The bell above the door jingled. It jingled 100 times a day now, more. The diner was never empty. Charlie joked that he'd forgotten what a clean grill looked like. Jenna joked that her feet had filed for divorce. The bell had become background noise, a heartbeat that nobody noticed anymore. But this time the room went quiet. That specific quiet. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of shame, the silence of something arriving that the whole room had been waiting for without knowing it. Axel looked up. Emma was standing in the doorway. Not sitting, standing. Her legs were shaky. Her knees wobbled with every micro movement. Her hands gripped a small pink walker, the same color as the wheelchair she'd been sitting in the last time she came through this door. Her blonde curls bounced as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, testing, adjusting, finding her balance. Her face was pure determination. Jaw set, eyes locked straight ahead. The face of a 5-year-old girl who had decided she was going to walk into this diner on her own 2 legs, and nothing on earth was going to stop her. Behind her, Rachel stood on the sidewalk. She wasn't touching Emma. She wasn't guiding her. Her hands were pressed against her own chest, fingers interlocked, pushing down hard, like she was physically trying to hold her heart inside her body. Her eyes were red. Her lips were pressed together so tight they'd gone white. She was shaking. She'd been shaking since the parking lot, since Emma had looked at her from the car seat and said, "I want to walk in, Mommy, by myself. I want to show Mr. Biker." Rachel had almost said no, almost said it was too far, too soon, too risky. But then she'd looked at her daughter's face, that impossible face that had survived 4 surgeries and 3 weeks of hospital food, and a father who walked away, and an owner who told her to leave. And she couldn't say no. She couldn't say no to this child ever again. Nobody in the diner moved. Tank was at the counter. His coffee cup was frozen halfway to his mouth. Charlie stood in the kitchen doorway, a spatula in one hand, flour on his face. Jenna was mid-step between tables, a pot of coffee in her grip, her eyes already flooding. Victor was in the back, dish towel over his shoulder. He heard the silence and came forward. He saw Emma and his whole body went rigid. His hand found the doorframe and held on. Axel set down the rag. He came around the counter, slow, steady. He didn't rush. He'd learned something about Emma in these 3 weeks. She didn't want to be rescued. She didn't want to be carried. She wanted to be seen, on her terms, in her time, with her own 2 feet on the ground. He walked to the center of the room and knelt down, one knee on the floor, the way he'd done the first time. Eye level. Always eye level with her. Because that's what respect looks like when you're 3 feet tall and the world is built for giants. Emma grinned. That grin. The one that went all the way up to her eyes and kept going. "Hi, Mr. Biker," she said. "Look at me." His voice came out rough, cracked at the edges, held together by nothing but willpower. "I see you, sweetheart. I see you." "I walked in all by myself." "Yeah, you did." She took another step. The walker clicked against the floor. Her left leg dragged slightly. The muscles weren't all the way there yet, might never be all the way there. But she compensated. She adjusted. She kept moving. "Mom said I could show you first," Emma said. Axel looked at Rachel. She was standing just inside the door now. She couldn't speak, couldn't form words. She just nodded, fast, desperate, the nod of a woman watching her daughter do the things she'd prayed for every night for 2 years. "You know what you just did?" Axel said. "I walked." "No," he shook his head. "You just proved that the bravest person in this whole town is 3 feet tall and likes her waffles with strawberry hearts. Emma giggled. That sound, God, that sound. It cut through every hard thing in the room and left only the soft parts, only the parts that mattered. She let go of the walker with one hand. She reached out toward Axel. Her fingers were small, open, trusting. Axel took her hand, small, warm, impossibly light. He could feel her pulse, fast, excited, alive. The diner exploded. It started with Tank. He slammed his coffee mug on the counter so hard it cracked. Then he was on his feet, clapping, his massive hands making a sound like thunder. Charlie came out of the kitchen, spatula still in hand, flour everywhere, tears cutting lines through the white powder on his face. Jenna dropped the coffee pot on the nearest table and sobbed. Open, loud, the kind of crying that doesn't care who's watching. Applause, cheers, stomping boots and slapping hands, and voices calling out things that didn't form words, just sounds. The raw, unfiltered noise of people feeling something too big for language. The farmer who'd given Rachel $20 that first day stood up and shouted, "That's our girl!" Dorothy, 81 years old, was clapping with tears running down her face, saying Henry's name over and over under her breath. A truck driver who'd never been in this diner before, who just stopped for coffee on his way through, found himself standing and applauding, and he didn't even know why. He just knew something important was happening, and his body responded before his brain caught up. And Victor stood in the back, dish towel on his shoulder, both hands at his sides. His face was wet, his chin trembled. He couldn't make a sound. He just stood there and watched a 5-year-old girl walk across the floor of his father's diner. The floor his father had laid, the floor Victor had walked across 1,000 times without once thinking about the people who couldn't. He clapped, slow at first, then harder. The sound coming from his hands was the sound of a man trying to put back together something he'd broken. Emma walked to her booth, the same booth, the corner booth near the window where she'd sat in her wheelchair 3 weeks ago and whispered 5 words that rewrote the story of this town. She let go of the walker. She grabbed the edge of the table with both hands. She pulled herself onto the seat. It took effort. It took everything she had. Her arms shook, her face twisted, but she did it. She sat down. She looked up at Jenna, and she said, as calm and certain as sunrise, "Can I have my waffle, please?" Jenna laughed through her tears. "Coming right up, baby." Charlie was already moving. He didn't need the order. He'd started the batter the moment he saw her in the doorway. Muscle memory, heart memory. The waffle iron hissed. The butter melted. The strawberries were already cut. Hearts, always hearts. Every single day since the diner reopened because Charlie cut them that way for every plate now. Every single one. Jenna brought it out, golden, steaming, perfect strawberry hearts, extra whipped cream, cold milk with a blue straw. Emma stared at it, the same way she'd stared at it the first time. Eyes wide, mouth open, as if she still couldn't believe it was real, as if some part of her still expected someone to take it away. "Is that for me?" she asked. "That's always for you," Jenna said. Emma picked up her fork. She took a bite. She closed her eyes and chewed, and her whole body relaxed, the tension leaving her shoulders, her hands going soft, her legs still under the table where they could rest. "It's good, Mommy," she said, syrup on her chin. The same words, the exact same words from 3 weeks ago, but different now, because 3 weeks ago she said them through fear, and today she said them through joy. Rachel slid into the booth across from her. She picked up a napkin and wiped Emma's chin. She was smiling so hard her face ached. Axel pulled something from inside his jacket. He'd been carrying it for a week, waiting for this moment, not sure it would come, hoping, praying in the way a man like Axel prays, which is not with words but with action, that it would. A small brass plaque, 4 inches by 6 inches, polished, engraved. He walked to the wall behind the counter. He hung it beneath Emma's drawings in the photograph, and Henry's napkin, and the yellow piece of paper with 4 words in a child's handwriting. Jenna leaned in. She read it again. One voice can feed 1,000 hearts. She pressed her hand flat against her chest. That's perfect. It's hers, Axel said. All of it. The drawings, the photo, the plaque, this wall. It's all hers. Emma was watching from her booth. What does it say? She called out. Jenna read it to her. Slowly, clearly. One voice can feed 1,000 hearts. Emma tilted her head, thinking, processing, the way 5-year-olds do when they're handed something bigger than they can carry, but they try anyway. Is that about me? She asked. Yeah, sweetheart, Axel said. That's about you. Emma looked at her waffle, then at the plaque, then at Axel, then back at her waffle. I just wanted a waffle, she said. The whole room laughed. Every person, through tears, through smiles, through the wreckage of 3 weeks of emotion, they laughed. Because she was 5, and she was honest. And sometimes the most profound truth in the world comes from a child who doesn't know she's being profound. Emma pushed her plate across the table toward Axel. Try one, Mr. Biker. Charlie made them extra good today. Axel slid into the booth beside Rachel. He picked up a fork. He cut a piece of waffle, golden, butter-soaked, a strawberry heart balanced on top, and put it in his mouth. He chewed slowly. The flavor hit him in a place that had nothing to do with his tongue. Buttermilk and vanilla and cinnamon and something else. Something that didn't have a name on any recipe card. Best waffle I've ever had, he said. That's because it comes with love, Emma said. Matter of fact, absolute, the way she said everything. Mom told me that's the secret ingredient. Axel looked at Rachel. She shrugged, smiling through tears that wouldn't stop. She's not wrong, Rachel said. Tank pulled a chair up to the end of the booth. He sat down heavy, the chair groaning under him. He looked at the sign glowing above the door. He looked at the wall covered in drawings and photographs and cards from strangers. He looked at Emma, eating with both hands now, syrup everywhere, laughing between bites at something only she found funny. You think this lasts? Tank asked quietly. Axel didn't answer right away. He watched Emma. He watched Rachel reach across the table and tuck a curl behind her daughter's ear. He watched Jenna pour coffee for Dorothy and squeeze her shoulder as she walked past. He watched Charlie in the kitchen, moving like music, feeding people the way his grandmother taught him. He watched Victor at the sink, sleeves rolled up, head down, washing plates with hands that were learning, slowly, painfully, plate by plate, what it means to serve instead of take. Depends, Axel said. On what? On whether we keep showing up. Tank nodded, slow, heavy, the nod of a man who understood that the question wasn't about a building or a business or a sign on a wall. The question was about choice, daily choice, the choice to wake up and walk through that door and do it again, even when the cameras are gone and the story fades and the world moves on to the next headline. Then it'll last, Tank said, because I'm not going anywhere. Neither am I, Axel said. He sat there, in Emma's booth, the booth where a little girl whispered 5 words that cracked open a town, a man, and a truth that had been buried for 45 years. He sat across from Rachel, who had carried her daughter through 2 years of hell on a back that never broke. He sat next to Emma, who was now trying to build a tower out of strawberry hearts and laughing every time it collapsed. Victor appeared at the table, dish towel on his shoulder, hands still damp. He stood there for a moment, not sure he was welcome, not sure he had the right. Emma looked up at him. She didn't know the whole story. She didn't know he was the one who'd told her to leave. She didn't understand cruelty yet, not the way adults understand it, with its layers and justifications and rationalizations. She just saw a man standing at her table. "Do you want a strawberry heart?" she asked him. Victor's face shattered, completely. Every wall he'd rebuilt in the past 3 weeks came down in the time it took a 5-year-old to offer him a piece of fruit. "Yeah," he whispered, "I'd like that." She held one up, he took it, he ate it, and he tasted for the first time what his father had tasted every day for 40 years. The flavor of a place that feeds people not because it's profitable, but because it's right. "Thank you, Emma," he said. "You're welcome. Charlie makes them into hearts, you know, because hearts mean love, and love means you're not alone." Victor turned away. He walked back to the sink. He picked up a plate, and the tears falling into the dishwater were the cleanest things he'd ever produced in his life. Axel watched him go. He said nothing. Some transformations don't need commentary, they just need witnesses. The afternoon light shifted. The lunch crowd thinned. Emma finished her waffle, drank her milk, and leaned against Rachel's arm, her eyes getting heavy, her body giving in to the exhaustion of walking farther than she'd ever walked before. "Mommy," she murmured, "can we come back tomorrow? We can come back whenever you want, baby." "Every day?" "Every day." Emma smiled, her eyes closed, her breathing slowed. She fell asleep in the booth where her story began, with syrup still on her fingers and a strawberry heart on her cheek, and the kind of peace on her face that only comes when a child knows, all the way down to her bones, that she is safe. Rachel looked at Axel. "I can't repay you for this, any of this. I wouldn't even know where to start. There's nothing to repay. There's everything to repay. Then repay it forward. Someday someone's going to need what you needed, and you'll be there. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Rachel reached across the table. She took his hand. She held it. And in that grip, mother to stranger, survivor to protector, two people connected by a child who changed them both. Every debt was settled. Axel sat in that booth until the sun went down. He didn't move. He didn't need to. Everything he'd been riding toward, every mile, every highway, every cold night and empty road and promise whispered in the dark, it all led here. Not to the road, not to the thunder, not to the open highway. To this, a 5-year-old girl asleep in a booth with syrup on her fingers. A mother who finally stopped carrying the weight alone. A cook who came home. A waitress who never gave up. A man at a sink, learning humility one plate at a time. And a wall covered in proof that the world can still be good. Outside the sign glowed, "Kindness served here." And below it, on a brass plaque that would hang there long after all of them were gone, 7 words that started with a whisper and became a roar. One voice can feed 1,000 hearts.
Because that's the truth.
The unshakable, unbreakable, irreversible truth. It doesn't take an army. It doesn't take money or power or fame. It takes one voice, one person, one moment when someone hears a child say, "They won't let me eat," and decides, not tomorrow, not eventually, not when it's convenient, but right now, right here, that the world is going to be different. Axel made that decision when he was 9 years old and hungry and alone in a trailer park outside Louisville. He carried it for 45 years, across highways and state lines and decades of hard road. He carried it in a wallet next to his heart, written in a child's handwriting on a yellow piece of paper. "I won't forget this." He didn't forget. He never forgot. And because he didn't forget, a little girl in Hollow Creek, Kentucky, ate a waffle with strawberry hearts. And then she stood up, and then she walked, and then she changed a town, and then she changed a man who'd forgotten how to be good. And then she changed 1,000 strangers who read her story and decided that they, too, would show up. All because one voice spoke when everyone else was silent. That's not a story, that's a promise. And it always starts, with someone brave enough to keep it.